I can't start this video without mentioning all of the amazing people who joined the Patreon. Thank you to everyone who did. This month the exclusive Patreon video is about how to set up an SQL database and send requests to it from the Unreal Engine using a web server. If you've ever wanted to make a game like Counter-Strike, League of Legends, or any of those online games that store stats and usernames and things like that, then you'll definitely want to check out the Patreon this month to get access to that video. A couple of months ago I covered the topic of bullet physics. How to make a bullet drop like a real bullet would. The video isn't the best, and there is a much cleaner way to do it, which is actually built into the Unreal Engine. The answer is the projectile movement component. The component attaches onto any collision component, and it will cause the collision to move however you like. In this video I'll be using that solution as it is much cleaner, and I will be reworking a couple of things to make it move exactly like a real bullet would. The cool thing about the system though is that it works on a per bone basis, meaning you can check exactly which part of the enemy you collided with. So you can check if you hit a headshot, you can check if you hit the left thigh of the enemy, right down to the fingers. I can check if I hit the middle finger of some guy's left hand if I really want to, right? Which is pretty cool. The two previews I've shown here are a velocity of 30,000, which is very hard to hit a target with, and 70,000, which is much easier to hit a target with. So in your game you might want to make the 30,000 velocity gun deal a ton of damage and make the 70,000 velocity gun deal less damage, just to make your game a little bit more balanced. I've made the system very flexible though, so if you want a gun to have 200,000 velocity you can do that. If you want a bullet to drop crazy fast you can do that. If you want a bullet to fly straight for the first 500 milliseconds and then start dropping after that, you can do that too. So I've really covered all the bases here with this system, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, to get started I'm going to go to the New Project C++ tab and make a new first person project. You could go with basic code if you wanted to make all the player and stuff yourself, but first person gives us a nice template to build off of. And I'm going to call the project name just Sniper will do. Inside of the content folder I'm going to make a assets folder. And we're going to drag and drop a sniper scope into the assets folder. Now you can get your sniper scope from wherever you want. I've gotten this one off Google Images. If you just type in sniper scope into Google Images you'll find something suitable. I'm not going to link a download to anything just for legal reasons. I don't want to be stealing anyone's assets. Just find something off Google Images and use it for a personal project and you'll be fine. The next step is to make some sort of HUD that the sniper scope can be applied to. So right now we just have this picture of a sniper scope. We need some actual HUD to put on the player's screen. So to do that, user interface. I'm going to call this HUD underscore sniper scope. Drag in an image. For the anchors you want to select center. Set the position to 0 at 0. Set the alignment to be 0.5 by 0.5. And then set the size to be 1920 by 1080, which is hopefully the size of your monitor. You might need to play around a little bit more to get it to show up on the screen properly, but other than that, that should be fine. Now you can go to the brush, and if you go down, type in sniper, and select the sniper scope. And now we have a basic HUD that we can use for a sniper scope. That's all we need. Very simple stuff. You could definitely add maybe like an ammo counter or something if you wanted, but that'll do for what we want to do anyway. Now we need a way of aiming into our sniper scope. So to do that we're going to go to input and add a aim. And I'm going to map that to the right mouse button. So when you press the right mouse button, it's going to aim in on your sniper. Okay, so now it's time to add the projectile class. So we'll go to new C++ class. And the type of class that we're going to make here is just going to be an actor. And we're going to call this projectile. We'll start off in the header file of our projectile class, and I'm just going to get rid of the tick function since we don't need that. The first thing I'm going to add to my bullet or projectile is a box component. This is going to serve as the collision for my projectile. And I'm going to make this edit defaults only so that in the blueprint window I can actually edit some of the values to do with this. Now you might be thinking, why don't we use a sphere for the bullet? Well, I figure a box is going to be more efficient. There's not as much data and vertices in a box as there is in a sphere. And it's not really going to matter all that much anyway, because the box is going to be tiny. The next thing we need is our projectile movement class that I talked about. So we'll type in projectile movement component, projectile movement. Again, this is going to be a U property edit defaults only. And I've put class there because I don't want to have to include the header file for this, so we just put class there and then we can add the header file later. We're going to have a static mesh component for the projectile mesh. So if you ever want your bullet to actually have a little bullet mesh that flies around, you can do that as well. However, this can be set to nothing if you don't want your bullet to have a mesh. And then the final thing is a particle system. We might want our bullet to have a trail effect or something similar. Now in this video I'm not going to show you how to make a bullet trail effect like the one that I showed you in the preview, but it's not too hard to figure that out. If you look up a few Unreal videos you should be able to figure out how to make your own bullet tracer effect. Another thing we're going to need is a projectile speed value. And again, this can be edit defaults only. I'm going to put a comment here. The velocity of our bullet. The next thing I need is a gravity delay variable. And I also need a gravity scale variable, so gravity delay and gravity scale. And again, I'm going to put a comment here to show you what this does. So this is the amount of seconds to wait until the bullet begins dropping. Gravity scale. This is the scale for the gravity acting upon our bullet. Cool. One more thing that I'm going to add is a onProjectile_hit function. This will be called when our bullet actually hits something. This needs to be a U function since we're assigning it as a delegate later on. You'll see that. But anyways, it looks like this. onProjectile_hit. Whatever we've hit is one of the parameters. The actor that we've hit is one of the parameters. We have other comp. We have if vector normal impulse. And finally we have if hit result hit. Those are all of the parameters that you will need for this function. And then the last thing I want is a function called apply gravity. Once we call this function, gravity will start affecting the bullet, making it drop. And that's pretty much everything that we need for our projectile. We can now go into the CPP, and the first thing I'm going to do is just get rid of the tick function since we won't need that. And we can also get rid of this line here as well. So let's start setting up some of these default values. By default, I'm going to say that my projectile speed is going to be equal to 40,000. And that can be changed from within the editor because we use the edit defaults only macro. We're also going to give it a gravity delay of 0.1 as a default. So after 0.1 seconds, the bullet will start to drop. We also have the gravity scale, and by default I'm going to set this to 3.5. However, again, this can be changed to your liking inside of the blueprints. So the first thing we need to do is instantiate the projectile collision. The projectile collision will be the root component of our bullet. So we're going to say projectile collision equals create default subobject. And we're going to create a box component. And we're just going to give it the name projectile collision. We're going to initialize the box extent of the bullet collision to be really up to you, but I'll just go with like 2 by 2 by 2 as the size of our box. And again, all of this is set up to be editable inside of the blueprints anyway. I'm going to set the collision profile name to projectile so that if we ever want to, we can set up different responses to the projectile hitting stuff. We can do that later on, but I'll just set it now for convenience. And we also want to link the onComponentHit. So we say onComponentHit.add dynamic. And there we go. So when our bullet hits something, we're saying, when our bullet hits something, call this function here. And then finally, I'm going to set the root component to be the projectile collision. And there we have it. The next thing to do is to include the projectile movement class. And this is inside of game framework. And it is projectile movement component.h. So just add that as a header file. And now we will be able to create our projectile movement. Now we need to tell the projectile movement what to attach to, essentially. And this is updated component equals the projectile collision. There we go. So we're saying that we want the movement to affect this collision here, which is the root component. We're going to set the initial speed to be the projectile speed that we set up. Projectile speed. We're going to set projectile movement B should bounce equal to false because we don't want bullets to bounce. There are certain scenarios where you might want them to bounce, but in this demo, bullets are not going to bounce. Finally, we're going to set the gravity scale equal to the gravity scale that we defined. I'm just going to paste this last bit of code in here. All it's doing is initializing the static mesh and initializing the particle system, and then saying that if the bullet doesn't hit anything after 3 seconds, then it will automatically get destroyed. That is what the initial lifespan variable does. So if I set this to 10, after 10 seconds our bullet would be automatically destroyed, and so on. So that's all we're doing there. I just don't want you guys to have to watch me type all of that out because that would be soul destroying. Anyways, let's make the onProjectileHit function. And I won't fill that function in just yet, just because there's a couple of things I need to do first. But we will make it. For some reason it's not making, whatever. I'll just set some other stuff up instead. So we'll do F timer handle, dummy handle. We're just making a dummy handle. We're not actually, we don't require a handle, so we're just making that. And what I'm doing here is I'm setting a timer that will go off after the gravity delay, and it will start affecting the bullet's gravity after the delay that we've set. So just to make it a bit more clear what we're doing here, I'm going to put a comment. After gravity delay amount of time, make the bullet start dropping. And all the apply gravity function does is takes projectile movement and sets the gravity scale equal to gravity scale. And that reminds me, gravity scale by default should just be 0. Because apply gravity will then apply the gravity for us. Next up I'll make this function here. All this function's going to do is check if the actor that we've hit with our bullet is a target. And we haven't made the target class yet, but I'm going to make that in a second. And here what I'm doing is actually checking if we've hit a bone. And if we have hit a bone, I'm going to put this in here, which is a toString. It will format a string and just say what you've hit. So if we hit a bot in the head, it'll say you hit the bot's head. If we hit him in the thigh, it'll say you've hit the bot's thigh, and so on. Once we have hit the other actor, we will just destroy them. So once we hit the target, just destroy the target. And finally, just destroy the bullet because it's hit something. Alright, the next thing to do is to make it a target class. There's nothing that actually goes inside of target class. All it is a static mesh actor. And we go to next and we just call that target. Create. And that's it. That's all that class does. And if we come up here and include the target.h file, we should now be good to go. One thing I did forget to mention is you will need to go into the sniper.h file and change engine minimal to engine, and that will let us use the game engine add on-screen debug message function. And also, for some reason, it's formatted my dash that way. So it formatted the wrong way, but I think we should be able to compile with no problems. Okay, after putting a projectile before the name of this function, everything compiles fine. And we've pretty much finished the system, believe it or not, even though we haven't seen any shooting going on yet. It's actually almost done already. So the only thing that's left to add at this point is to go into the sniper character.h and we're going to go down to where the begin player is here, and I'm just going to add a few variables. We're going to add one called B is aiming. This is going to store the state of whether the player is aiming or not. Now, I don't want to show you how to do HUDs in C++ because it's very time consuming and it's kind of overkill for what we need to do. So what I'm going to do is make 2 blueprint implementable events that will show and hide the sniper HUD, because HUDs are way easier to display in blueprints. So all we're going to do is create these 2 functions here. Show sniper overlay and hide sniper overlay. You do not need to implement these functions because they will be implemented in blueprints. That's what this blueprint implementable event thing here actually means. Last thing we need to do is make a toggle aiming function. And I'm sure you guys can guess what this does. If we're aiming, it'll stop aiming. If we're not aiming, it will begin aiming. So we're going to implement that function. And then over on the CPP file for our character, we're going to go into the setup player input function and create a new input so that our player can now aim. So we're going to do player input component bind action, and we're going to bind the aim action so that when you press the aim button, it's going to toggle aiming. That simple. Now we need to make a toggle aiming function, which is a pretty easy function to make, to be honest. So we're going to say that if we are aiming, then stop aiming, and if we aren't aiming, then begin aiming. That's all this line does. So if B is aiming is true, make it false. If it's false, make it true. We're going to check if we are aiming. So if we are aiming, we're going to show the sniper overlay. We're going to get the first person camera component and set the field of view to be 10. And this will make us zoom in a lot. That's a real simple trick if you ever want to zoom in your camera, by the way. You can just set the field of view to be some low value and that will zoom in a bit. And then we're going to get the gun and set the visibility of the gun to false, so that while we're zoomed in, we don't see our gun anymore. If we're no longer aiming, we will want to hide the sniper overlay, set the field of view back to the regular field of view, and show the gun again. And that is our toggle aiming function done. So we can build all of our code now, and hopefully everything compiles fine. Okay, with everything compiled, let's set it all up. So what we're going to do is go to the projectile, right click, create a blueprint class of it, and inside of assets, I'm going to call this BP underscore test projectile. And you can see here's our projectile. It's a very simple projectile. If we click on the mesh, we can give it a mesh if we want. You don't have to give your bullet a mesh, but I kind of want to. Why not? Let's make it a tiny little ball. So we'll just go to the transform and make that tiny. There we go. So now we have a tiny little ball acting as our bullet, but you don't have to give your bullet a mesh if you don't want to. I'm also going to give it some particles. If we go to particles and select the sparks, that's just going to allow us to see what our bullet's doing. You really don't need that if you don't want to. And if we go into the projectile movement, you can see some of the settings for what our bullet will do when it's fired. So, there it is there, initial speed, 40,000. There is one more thing we need to do. And inside of the player controller, right now it fires these things. We need to tell it to fire our custom bullet instead. So we'll go back into our code, and this is truly the last thing we need to add. Go into the onFire function, you can search for it. And also on the .h, we need to change this to say T subclass of a projectile. change this to say projectile, change this to say projectile, and add the projectile class up here. So now we're actually telling the game to shoot our new custom projectile instead of that ugly yellow ball that comes with the template. So we'll go into the first person CPP blueprints, open up our character and go to the full blueprint editor. Where it says projectile class, select our blueprint test projectile that we made. We're now all set up to fire our new projectile that we've made. We'll also go into the event graph here and override some functions. All you want to do is override the show sniper overlay and hide sniper overlay functions. So all we're doing is making these functions over on blueprints instead of making them in C++, because like I mentioned, it's just easier to do it that way with HUDs. We're just going to add a new variable called sniper overlay. Go to the type and type in user widget, and you can now save. Right click and type create widget, connect this up, and we want to create the sniper scope HUD. You can drag out from owning player and type in get player controller, and that's just a way of getting the player controller, which you don't really have to do, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Finally, drag out from here and type add to viewport. At this point, the sniper screen will now be on our viewport. We need a way of hiding it, and that's very easy to do. Hold control, drag out our sniper overlay, and then type remove from parent. And that will remove the sniper overlay from the parent. So now, if I boot in a new editor window, we have a sniper scope. Now we can't close it right now, which is a little bit weird. Ah, yes. Hold Alt and drag out your sniper overlay. And we want to set the sniper overlay as well. There is one more problem, and that's that the ugly red crosshair is being drawn, so just go to sniperhud.cpp and you can actually just remove all this stuff here and then compile. That will just get rid of the crosshair. Doesn't really need to be there. Cool, so we're back in the engine and we can now scope in with our sniper, and we can actually shoot it too. And notice that it drops off like a real bullet would. It's kind of hard to see because of the fact that our level's really small, but check it out. I'm definitely shooting bullets and they're definitely dropping. And you can see the bullet really well because I attached these spark particles to it. But obviously in a real game you'd want to attach like a nice little bullet trail particle to it. So if you want to see what's going on a little bit better, there is a way to do that. Delete all this stuff, go to the landscape here. Select grass, fill world, and create. Click on the landscape and we'll set the location to be 170 on the Z axis, and that will just make it sit on the ground nicely. At this point you can now sort of test things out a little bit better. And we'll drag some of these targets into the game as well. Right click, create blueprint, put it in assets, and I'm just going to call this BP_target. By default it just lets you attach a static mesh, so I'm just going to type in cube and use a cube. And let's drag in a bunch of targets to shoot with our gun. There we go. We're now hitting the targets. You might want to turn the velocity up and tinker with some of these settings to get it a little bit better. I also noticed my HUD isn't really lined up that well, so you may need to mess around with that a little bit as well to get that going good. Last thing I'll show you is how to get a dummy bot in there, so you can check if you've got a headshot, whether you shot him in the thigh. Where have you shot this bot? So if you go into the library here, go down, add the animation starter pack to your project. You may need to get this from the marketplace. So you just add this to the sniper project. And now you can see anim starter pack here. Go into the mannequin, go to the mesh, open up the physics asset, and you can see all of the different collision for the mannequin. So this way, you can see, you know, if the bullet hits him here, this is the head. If the bullet hits him here, and so on and so forth. You may want to actually scale out some of this a little bit, because by default, some of them kind of go inside of the body, which is going to make our life difficult later on. So just make some of this a little bit bigger, maybe. That looks pretty good to me. And we can save. Go back into the target. Open the full blueprint editor. We'll get rid of this cube. Oh, actually, we can keep the cube. Just set that to clear there. And you want to add a skeletal mesh. I'm just going to call this bot mesh. Select the mannequin. Go to use animation asset. And I'll just type in aim and we can get this one here. That works fine. Okay, that's a bit stupid looking. If I type in stand. Equip pistol standing. That'll do, whatever. Doesn't really matter. But the important thing is that you tell the bot to have collision. So if you go to collision presets, select block all. Now hopefully we should be able to drag in some of these targets. And when you shoot them, it should tell you where you've hit the bot. So let's try that out. I hit the hand there, I hit the spine there. Yeah, there's definitely some alignment issues with where the projectile is being spawned. Now, I didn't have these on my other project, and I think it's because the Unreal template does not spawn bullets out of the player's head, it spawns them at the muzzle location of the gun, which is a little bit different from how some games handle spawning bullets. Okay, I got my bullets to shoot straight by just changing the gun offset to 100-0-0. So my gun offset was a little bit skewed, meaning that the bullets shot out from the wrong side of the viewport. And this would kind of make sense if you wanted the bullets to come directly out of the muzzle. But since we want our bullets to shoot straight, that is the gun offset that you want. Anyways, what happens now is that we can shoot these guys. Oh yes, I made it nighttime by the way as well. And it will actually tell us what bone we've hit the enemy in. I've got one way down there as well. So there you go. There you have it. There is the easy way to do bullet drop and make a sniper scope. Sorry that I didn't show you guys how to get the sniper rifle as well. But I don't really want to have to, like, you know, put a sniper rifle asset for download, especially when I didn't make it. I don't know the legal implications of all that stuff, but if you want, there will be tons of sniper rifle models online, and literally all you do is you just swap the default model that we see here out with the sniper you want, and that's the only difference. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The recoil is also pretty simple as well. You might want to look into doing that too, but that's the basic idea of bullet drop and how to make a sniper in Unreal Engine 4. So, there we go. Man, that was a tutorial. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. And anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video.